What's going on, friends? It's your boy Stan Tenacious TX Vapes.
This is Michelle Lynn of Doldine Mods.
The punk rock silver fox.
And you're listening.
You are listening.
And you're listening
to the Shedtime podcast.
What's up, everybody, and welcome to a brand new episode of the Shedtime podcast. We're doing something a little different today because the boys are not available. That's right, the guys are traveling right now. You've heard us talk about it for a while. The Steel Valley meetup was going on. And yeah, like we were talking about last week, you know, because of our recording schedule, they would be traveling while we were supposed to record. But you know what, man? Sean Tyven, the Angry Hippie's not going to leave you hanging. So what I've done is I've put together a clip show. That's right, yo. A fucking clip show, dude. I got some good weed, a little bit of Bubba Kush. It's delicious. So here's what's going to happen, right? We're going to go ahead, smoke a little, enjoy ourselves, relax. And first up, we're going all the way back to season 1. Yes, that's right. We're going back to season 1 when we had the Pot Brothers at Law. Yo, I'm still amazed that it's so early in the life of this podcast we had those dudes on. The original air date was August 2nd of 2020. So if you guys didn't catch that one, you can go back and check it out. They're all available over there at shedtimepodcast.com. That's right, you know where to go. shedtimepodcast.com. So yeah, go check it out. And here we go. Let's get into this little segment from the Pot Brothers at Law.
All day, every day. It's probably one of my favorite things on my feed. People who have watched my feed have seen me repost their work to share with you guys. So I want to go ahead. I want to throw it off, and I want to get the story. I want to know, how did you guys get into cannabis, and how did that lead you into the legal world of cannabis and working there? I don't know which one of you guys wants to start with telling that story.
Well, big brother.
Go ahead.
All right. So,
and give him the right story, though.
See, so this is where he tells me to tell this fucking story, and then he'll interrupt me somewhere along the line. And
I'm not going to interrupt today.
Oh, but you already have. You just did.
Anymore.
I was
from now on.
All right. What was the question?
So we want the origin story. How did you get into cannabis, and how did that lead you into cannabis law?
Okay. So my older brother, he became an attorney, I believe it was in 1986. I became an attorney in 1996. So he had a good 10 years of practicing. He was doing business consulting, corporate counseling, contracts. He worked for some big, huge law firms in the beginning of his career and did a bunch of that stuff, and hated working for people, opened up his own thing and started doing his own thing. And 10 years later, I came along. I had two things going on. I wanted to finance plays and films I was writing, and I was engaged to be married. I was 23. My brother, and till then, I had been kicking around as an actor, odd jobs, and doing a bunch of different things. My brother said, "You're going to get married. You got to have a job, you know, and you got to make money." And we do have an older brother who's a doctor, and there's no way I could go to school for 10 years or whatever that is. And then I figured my middle brother here was doing pretty good, and if he could do it, I could do it. So I threw my hat in and went to law school. And by the time I became an attorney in 1996, in California, Prop 215 had just passed in 1996, giving cannabis patients some of their rights, but it was still a crime first. And if you got busted, you had to have your medical card, and you had to prove this and that and the other thing. And I started right in with criminal defense work and which led right into representing these cannabis patients who were being accused of crimes and then having to fight and saying, no, I'm allowed to use it under Prop 215. So I was dealing with cannabis right out of the gate. My entire career, I've been dealing with criminal defense and the cannabis side of things. Then as the laws started to progress and caregivers were allowed to take care of people and businesses were allowed to form not-for-profit corporations, my nephew, my brother's son, known as Jay Cures now, who now owns West Coast Cure, when he was, 18, he'd say, I like this, medicine. I like what it does. My brother introduced it to him. He was a young kid coming from a nasty divorce, family that was going on, and other doctors and therapists he was seeing wanted to put other kind of pills inside of this kid. Mm-hmm. And my brother said, come in the backyard. You want to try this, see how it makes you feel. And nobody had any idea that it was going to really catapult him into this compassionate use business that has been flourishing for years now. But when he first did it, it was felonies.
Yeah.
And he had to make sure he was doing it properly. So as things were progressing, you had the criminal defense elements that you had to be ready for, and you had the running of the business that you had to do. So unlike a lot of other quote unquote cannabis attorneys that are out there, between me and my brother, he handles the business side of things. I handle the criminal defense side of things. And over the course of like 7 years, my nephew picked up 7 felonies, a couple of cases. And because he operated the way we instructed him to, and more importantly, he knew how to handle cops when they pulled him over or raided his place. And we really, the shut the fuck up was really in the beginning created to hammer that into our family and his friends and people we knew in the industry, going back 20 years. And this is what you do. This is what you do when it happens. And when he caught those cases, we would ultimately get them dismissed, not because he was operating properly, but because he shut the fuck up. And we caught the cops lying on both separate occasions. And then because he was operating properly as the not-for-profit at that time, we were then able to go in and get an order to get everything back. Go into the evidence locker with the order and get everything they took back. The cannabis, the money, everything. And wow. So that is where we kind of, made our bones, paid our dues at learning and becoming as proficient as we could with the business of cannabis so as to protect our family. And so it was my nephew who, for years, you guys need to get on Instagram. You guys need to get on it. Like whenever it first started, Instagram or whatever. And both me, I got on Facebook when it very first started as free advertising for my movies and my office and stuff like that. My brother barely understood Facebook. And we were like, you look at Instagram back then, tits and, pictures of pot and what do we, we weren't interested. Yeah. And then you fast forward, maybe so 20, I would say like sometime in 2010 or so, I was doing a lot of cannabis cases. And me and my brother, we maintained our separate offices, law offices of Mark Wasserman, law offices of Craig Wasserman, but we were in the same suite. And we would go outside, where you see us filming our tip of the day. That's the parking lot. We'd go outside, smoke, bullshit. And I was like, I'm getting all these cannabis, these pot cases, and we're brothers, we're lawyers and pot brothers at law. But like a joke, I'm going to make some cards and give them to all my cannabis clients from now on. And so I did that. And I made these cards that said on the back of it to any law enforcement personnel, I do not consent to searches. And it had this blurb on it from a law professor once taught me long ago. And that was like the beginning of our cards. And so once then we fast forward to January 22nd, 2015. My brother's son, my nephew, comes into the office out of nowhere, as he will so often do, and says, "Hey, I've got some friends. They're looking for attorneys to interview on a show, and this is 2015, to talk about Prop 64 and the laws that are about to change in cannabis in California, and come on and smoke. And they can't find any attorneys who will agree to go on and smoke." And I told them my uncle and my dad would do it. I mean, that's my nephew. He's, didn't ask first. I told him.
Yeah.
And my older brother there was like, "Well, hold on a minute." And I was like, "Well, let's go. Let's go. What's the problem? What are we waiting for? Let's go." And, my brother had concerns. What's the bar going to say? We're smoking out there. What is this? First of all, what is it? And then he said, it's, my friends at Be Real TV. And so I know Cypress Hill. That's my era, and but I was like, I didn't know Be Real's on TV. What, is he on ABC? What channel is he on? What do you mean? And how are we going to smoke? He's like, "No, it's an internet-based show," and so on and so forth. And me and my brother discussed it for about 10 minutes. And, I was like, "Hey, we have our physician recommendations. We're going into a private facility where they allow it and they don't care. Fuck it. And so he's, "Okay, when is it? We got to go right now." And so we jump up to LA to Be Real TV studio. We get on this show called Getting High with Adam Ill. And we probably hour and a half, 2 hours, took phone calls, bongs, joints, blunts, dabs. We were just doing it all, answering questions. And again, my nephew says, "You guys got to create an Instagram account. If you take some pictures with B, and you guys got to, And so my brother gets on Instagram and types in POT_.
No, I typed in a space bar.
Oh, that's
I didn't
right.
I didn't know the space bar gave an underscore.
Right. So he's ruined me for the rest of our days, because now whenever we give it at the end, I'll do it. You got to go to Instagram account, POT_brothers_at_law. Right. And because he didn't know the space bar makes those, because he knows nothing about the internet and social media, or he knows nothing about it.
I know enough.
Now, 5 years later, so he created that. We took some pictures at the studio, and then I got on Instagram like for the next 3-4 days going, what is this? What are we going to do with it? And I figure, like Facebook, it's free. We put up some legal posts or something, and maybe we'll get a few clients out of it. I don't know. And then they had 15-second videos back then, right? And so
Yep.
we decided, how are we going to utilize videos? And so we decided we do tip of the day, starting with a series of 15-second tips on what to do when you get pulled over. From the time you see the light, because everything that you see us talking about now, I mean, we've been telling our clients for 20, 30 years. It's not, it's nothing new. We just now then put, as my nephew said,
have a platform now.
Yeah, and more people like him. He was like, you taught me this and how to deal with the cops. People need to know that, especially in the cannabis space.
Mm-hmm.
And so
people shouldn't have to go pay $500 an hour for a consult to learn the shit we're telling people.
Dude, that right there is awesome.
Yeah.
we figure we do put these tips out there, and maybe we'll get a few clients out of it, And then within, I don't know, it was like a week or two, we had 5,000 followers. And to give it some kind of perspective for myself, took me, 8 years to get 5,000 friends on Facebook. And so I'm like, hey, something's going on. What can we do? What is this? And so I really kind of dug into Instagram, and for like 12 hours a day learning whatever, how, algorithm bullshit and who's posting what and this and that and whatever. And I just started coming up with our own, we're going to post 2, 3, 4 times a day. We're going to do this. We're going to do that. And then we got to the point where we were doing 15-second tips, getting a lot of information in 15 seconds. And then they changed to a minute. And then, of course, IGTV. And through 2015 to December 25th, 2018, we amassed about 119,000 followers. So pretty good for 3 years as I look at everything else, and our engagement was really good. And so that was Instagram. I had created Pop Brothers at Law on all social media platforms. So one of which was a Facebook page, which at that time had about 600 people following. And so on all the platforms, I had different notifications set, because for us, it's just one call that, hey, I got arrested and I need an attorney, so I don't want to miss anything. So I have the notification set. And the Facebook one was just a little ding, and it went off maybe once or twice every couple weeks. So on this particular December 18th, Christmas morning, I was on vacation with my family, on a balcony smoking a joint, and my Facebook notifications start going ding, 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 and I thought my phone was broken. It wasn't stopping. And so I turned my phone off, I turned it back on, and it was going. I jump on my computer and I tracked down all these comments and all this shit. And so what it was, a Facebook page called Respect My Region, which is like a political hip hop page from these kids out of Seattle, Washington at that time. And they reposted one of our Shut the Fuck Up Friday videos that talks about getting raided, and two people talked about I volunteer here, and one guy shut the fuck up, and that whole thing. And then it got reposted by Roger Stone. And if you don't know who Roger Stone is, he's the big political strategist who was sentenced to 7 years and just got his sentence commuted by president. And he reposted it saying,
This is before his trial.
Right.
Yeah, this is
actually, I think, after he got a gag order. He had a gag order imposed during his trial. So he reposted this saying, "These should be my lawyers," and he reposted our "Shut the Fuck Up" video. And from there, it just went fucking insane.
Well, yeah, from there, that video has in excess of 500 million views on like all social media platforms. It started showing up, and people were P. Diddy and Snoop, and
I just want a penny for every one of those.
Michael Rappaport.
Yeah, for real.
Yeah, that'd be nice. Michael Rappaport hit us up soon after that, and we got on his podcast. And now we're, like 458,000 on Instagram, and, just across all social media with everything going, we probably have close to 1 million followers. And, we started our Twitch stream, but that's how it all started. And we kind of just fell ass backwards into it. And when we decided on these tip videos, we started in the car, and my brother was smoking in the car. And a good friend of ours, someone who became a good friend of ours along this journey, Dr. Dina, who's a big 420 celebrity influencer and doctor to the stars, called me up and said, "Hey, you might not want to do that in your car. You're going to give some kids the wrong idea that they need to smoke, that they could smoke in their car while they're driving." And we didn't think about, being, social media virgins at this point with regards to Instagram. And so, it was, we took that, we commented about it. And, whenever we did anything after that in the car, it was, we're stopped, we're hotboxing, we're done, spray, and so with that in mind, we just kept creating more tips, and it started off with, how are we going to do this? Who's going to say what? In fact, the funny is, as it was, the first time we were doing it, and we were both talking and saying shit, trying to get it in 15 seconds, my brother's 2 daughters, my nieces, were out there, and one of them said, "Dad, just let Uncle Mark talk and you smoke." And you know what? We did that, and it became its own thing, like kind of Jay and Silent Bobish, and then by the nature of what we both do, I'm in court more, so I'm always dressed up more. And my brother's in the office more, so he's more casual, and so we were just dressed as we were, and people started commenting on it. People started like they were more interested in what tie I was wearing and how I did my knot than the fucking law we were teaching. You know, or silly things like my brother rolling a joint with a $1 bill getting, you know, more attention than, you know, but we kind of learned how to interweave all that stuff to, you know, hey, we're doing something that's educational.
As my kid put it, just organic.
Yeah, well,
we didn't start off on any agenda. We didn't start off an IG account to do anything or get anywhere other than, you know what, now that we're on here, let's spread a little knowledge that my son said, yeah, you need to, you know, this is simple shit, but nobody knows or thinks about it. So that was how we started attacking it. And then, I mean, the whole shut the fuck up in the script, it all rolls over into, and cannabis prohibition into bad cops and cops who do the wrong thing and how to catch those line cops and how to catch the cops who are doing bad things. If you follow what we say, like when my son did, he shut the fuck up, didn't consent to a search. The cop lied about him consenting to the search. We called her on it on the stand, and she all but admitted to lying. My son told the judge that we asked him, did you give consent? He said no. He told the judge that if he gave consent, he'd be disowned from his family. Literally said that in open court to the judge.
He did. He did.
Well,
Smart. It's
And
smart.
and then we had and that's another thing too is, you know, we fight cases. If they're fightable, unless you completely fucked yourself, which happens unfortunately all too often, believe it or not, we're doing damage control as opposed to, okay, you shut the fuck up, you didn't consent. You know what? We can start attacking the search. We can attack the stop. When we had a call the other day where someone came in, they said that they got searched. The cop had a warrant, didn't show him the warrant, and said, okay, go ahead and go in. That's consent. He didn't even serve him the warrant. So now there's no way to fight the search.
Mm-hmm.
If you see the warrant or you wait and they get probable cause or they say they have anything other than your consent, you can fight that. And a lot of times you can beat that because they fabricate it. And they got to be called on the carpet. And with video and audio, like in my son's case, we caught this cop lying dead to rights. Because we had the cop on the stand read the back of the card that my son gave that you could see in the window. In the video, you could see him handing it to the cop where it says, I do not consent to a search on the back of the card. So my brother's like, so in a minute and a half, when the tape went blank, literally the audio went, right when he supposedly consented. And then she searched his car saying he consented. And when she read, I do not consent to a search, my brother's like, so what did you say to my nephew? To make him, you know, he gave you a cut to make him change his mind. And my brother just ripped her new ass.
Taught him his whole life to shut the fuck up. Or I didn't say that, but we taught him his whole life to not talk to cops. And you didn't and he gave you a card, said he didn't consent. And then 2 minutes later, I got to know, what did you say? Changed his mind. And she said, well, what, you know, the timeline, you're confusing me. And I said, well, isn't that because you're lying? Which that's the only time I've done it. I'll never do it again. As an attorney, you're not supposed to do that. They're lying, liars, everybody knows it. But the guy was emotional. It was my nephew and this cop. Wow. But the judge found in that case that there was no consent to a search. Case dismissed.
Yeah. Case dismissed. And that was one of the greatest days of my life when your son gets out of felonies and they're dismissed and hanging over his fucking head for a year or two. Mm-hmm. The second best day was walking out of the Newport Beach police station with a box of fucking weed.
Yeah, when you guys said that you get stuff back, that's crazy. I'd never heard that before.
It was awesome. You go down our page down below somewhere, you can see it. We videotaped it. It was fucking awesome. I mean, so it was really the organic nature of our page, actually, because it just happened. I mean, like I said, these were easy things to think about. Well, you know what? Why not? Let's tip about this today. Let's not, what about this? People think about that.
Well,
and so it just kind of took off.
All right. Welcome back, guys. I hope you liked that little blast from the past. Coming up next, Speak the Rebel. Yo, this was the second time we'd had Speak the Rebel on the show. This episode aired on the 31st of January of 2021. When we had Speak on, he had just dropped the Vidal Baboon EP early on, and he was just getting ready to drop Slobros. So we talked to Speak a little bit about all of that, about, songwriting, and you might actually find out how musical theater inspired a hip-hop act. So check that shit out, and we'll catch you when we come back.
Woo! We are back with Speak the Rebel, and guys, all right. When we had Speak on last time, Vidal Baboon was dropping. We had some craziness going on. You had just released the Porschmut single, as I recall, right?
Yes, yeah, absolutely.
And now you just dropped the first single off the new one. So let's take it back. What have you done since we last talked to you? Because I mean, I know I've been staying like on top of it. But for those who don't know, what have you done since we last saw you and you had just dropped that single?
Oh man, well, so the entire scope of the industry, quote unquote, I hate calling it an industry, music industry, live music industry, totally changed, obviously, because of COVID. Mm-hmm. When I talked to you guys, it was over the summer, right? I think it was the summer.
I actually think that it was like not long after.
It was like right after
April,
like right at the beginning or something.
Yeah. So we had like no idea, and at that point they were like, "Oh, as soon as we hit the summer, we're gonna be straight." Blah blah blah.
Yeah.
No, obviously that
didn't happen.
Oops. So basically, I'm a dude that plays at least once or twice a week, and that's my whole thing, you know what I mean? That's how I sell albums and t-shirts and all that shit. So now that I can't do that, I have just been recording my ass off for the last like 8 months. And people are consuming entertainment and music like 10 times the pace that they were before.
Yeah.
So I dropped the Vidal Baboon EP back then, and it's been awesome, man. Like everyone's tuned in. Well, not everyone, but more people are tuned in and digging it and taking part in it, and that's been awesome. And then I noticed one day people just kind of got burnt out on it. Not burnt, but it had made the rounds.
Yep, it ran its course.
It's been out about 6 or 7 months, and not being able to play shows, it's like it's harder to turn new people on when your core fan base is like, yeah, bro, we've played this like 700 times. So basically, the demand for new music has been punching me in the face. And I got like 2.5 different projects going on right now that my goal right now is to just consistently release new shit every like 3 months right now, little 4, 5, 6 songs at a time, because people are actually like demanding it, which is cool. So what's coming out now is the Slobros EP. Yeah, dude, I need a panel to like run some of these stupid names by for my songs and my albums. I'm the worst at naming songs.
They're awesome though, bro.
No, dude, I think
that's dope.
That's your brainchild, man. Like
Yeah, man,
that's
it's
like
like
your little excerpt of You know, people may not see it, but those little funky names are kind of what like pull people in my opinion.
Well,
Yeah,
so here's the
exactly.
thing, though, right? Like, I have a story I haven't even told you, but when I was doing over the summer, you know, we had the show and everything with you. I've been banging the album plenty. So over the
Thank
summer,
you.
my manager, you know, from the music scene, the dude that I still work with, he's still my mentor. He had an issue in his studio. Studio flooded. So we had to gut the whole fucking thing, bro. Like, tore down the old mic booth, everything, gutted the whole place, rebuilt it. So during all that time, man, you know, I'm there every day with him, helping him, and we get talking about different things here and there, and I'm like, listen, bro, I'm like, I got somebody I need to show you. I'm like, this kid speak, and I'm like, let me show you. And I pulled up Vidal Baboon, and I fucking put on Porchmut, and I'm like, this kid is versatile, watch. And I start playing Vidal Baboon, and he's listening to it, and he's like, all right, this kid can spit. And of course now, like, he knows leads, obviously. It's Dickie Skins, bro. Like, dude helped fucking Drew Garrity start Commonwealth Records. Like,
Nice.
you know what I mean? Like, he's known in the scene out here.
That's
so, like,
that's some throwback shit.
right, like, that's my man.
Commonwealth Records is like the beginning.
Exactly, and like that's the dude that's my mentor.
Oh, nice.
So shout out to Dickie Skins. Guys can check him out. He's got a record out there, Double Threat. But yeah, Dickie Dickie and I are just sitting there talking, you know, because he's doing Hollywood shit nowadays. He's more worried focused on movies and everything. I'm like, all right. So he's hearing Porchmut and shit. And he's like, yo, this kid can spit. I see why Leeds likes him. Yeah. And I'm like, all right, now watch. And I throw on Heartaches and Hand Grenades. And he goes, whoa, wait a minute. And I'm like, yeah, hold on. And then I go to LeBron Jovi. And he's like, yo, he can write songs. Like, he doesn't just know how to spit. He actually knows how to write a song.
I appreciate that, man.
And that's the key, right? Is that, like, there's a lot of people who can rap. Like, you want to hear a rapper rap? YouTube and SoundCloud is full of them. And I'm not going to dog those people, but
no, I know what you mean. No, yeah.
You were able to really write songs.
You want to know what's fucked up? Like where that came from? So I'm gonna out myself on this one because this is some like deep secret shit. Musical theater is where my ability to write as alter egos and write these like whole
fucking stories, man.
Fiddler on the Roof shit, you know what I mean? Like there's all sorts of shit going on, and like I don't know why I've actually never like been to like a real play in real life, but musical theater, man, for some reason just hit home with me, like Jesus Christ Superstar and fucking Les Mis and shit like that.
Well, fuck
so,
yeah,
dude, that was like a big influence on me. And also like System of a Down, it's like in the same vein. It's like operatic. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
So I try and aim for these like big full hooks with like multiple personalities and shit. And that's where that came from. Like big tough rap guy, and I'm like sitting banging fucking Fiddler on the Roof and like. I just want to, for the record, all right, I just want to say I've been down with musicals before Hamilton.
Yes.
Right, you know what I'm saying? That shit's dope, don't get me wrong. But I've been rocking that shit since a kid.
Yo,
I don't know where it came from, man. I don't know where the fuck it came from. I just dig it.
You grew up on Disney movies like the rest of us, and all those Disney movies had that musical element too.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
musical
Little
storytelling,
Orphan Annie was
bro.
banging back in the day. I remember
never
when I was a kid, I
like-
used to love catching Little Orphan
Never
Annie.
considered that.
It's literally musical storytelling is what it is, bro.
Yeah, dude.
You know what I mean? It's just you're adapting it to your craft compared to being it visual, you're doing it lyrically. You know what I mean?
Exactly. And like, you know, I have like a lot of non-traditional hip hop influences, you know, like Pink Floyd and things of the such. So it bleeds in where I want to have actual like structure to some of these songs. Now keep in mind, dude, I'm not like Jesus of the songwriting. But I try and break away from that like traditional hip hop mold where it's just like, here's me rapping and here's the hook, and like that's dope, but you hear it once and you're like, all right, I've been there. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Yeah. How many rap songs with a bridge?
Yeah, exactly. Like you gotta, I don't know, man. You gotta do some different shit.
Yeah, break it up a little bit, change it up in there, throw a surprise.
Well, dude, even as like a consumer, like I'm sitting at the shop the other day and I got so pissed off because Sean sent an email to all of us with the music that you sent us to share.
Oh, cool.
And I'm sitting at work yesterday pissed because I'm scrolling through my fucking emails and I'm trying to find this music to fucking vibe out to because I'm fucking tired of listening to the same old shit, the same repetitive bullshit that comes across my streaming platforms.
Yeah,
because it's the same shit, dude. It's the same fucking beat. It's the same hook. It's the same shit over and over again. And then they get you hooked on one part of the song and that's it.
Bro.
And everybody's doing the same goddamn shit
exactly.
for how many years,
Exactly.
That's like Sean says, I'm still thinking people from 98 and the early 90s, late 80s are still relevant because that's the shit that sounds different to me still to this day.
Yeah, exactly. And like my whole goal this time around, music wise, and like you'll hear it on a lot of the new stuff that's not out yet. It took me a minute to kind of get back into the groove of writing and rapping, and I had to warm back up for a couple of releases after 5 years of absolutely nothing. So like my whole goal right now, and this is to try and be like a grown-up musician. I'm trying to I dig what like Childish Gambino does, and Pharoah Monch and Royce. They have these like complicated kind of next level shit. You know what I mean?
It's just like grown man mentality sort of stuff. You know what I mean? It's like they're on a different level now. You know what I mean?
It's like you guys are like people of your age are coming into like your prime. You're coming into that maturity age. You're coming into the light at the end of the tunnel, man. I feel it the same way within my art, dude. And
absolutely,
there's that point where when you're young and you're trying to you have this point to prove, and then you get past that point to fucking prove, and you're just like your whole body. You can express what you really want to put out, and then you're like, oh shit, now I can really kind of take all these tools that have been bombarded me and I didn't know how to use them, but now I know how to use them.
Well, and it's not just that, but it's coming into your sound, your vision, your style, right?
Exactly.
And knowing who you are as an artist.
Like for me,
it's taken a long time to get there.
Yeah,
it takes a long time.
I never figured out exactly where my groove was. I can spit. I knew that. We established it. I did shows. I did all of that. That's great. But I never really found the groove I belonged in, and it is what it is. Once I found it, it was in photography. And it was like, oh shit, I found a groove where I actually knew how to dial in my look my way. And it's like, you've kind of done the same thing because I've watched you all these years now. You've really started to find your groove as an artist and cut that line for yourself, which
dude, it is like a constant battle because when you come up, right, you sound a lot like your influences. And it's just natural. I mean, it's like most of us start by imitation in a sense of
influence is key if you think about it.
Yeah. So at this point in musical life for me, it's like, all right, how do I be influenced by a certain sound or a certain song without ripping the entire style and other stuff? You know what I mean? It's a constant battle, man. And I'm still mostly just throwing shit against the wall, trying to figure out what works. And so this new EP basically is hey, check it out. I'm working on shit still. I haven't disappeared. I hate the whole you drop an album and then you don't hear from someone for 2 years. And I don't do a lot of features. It's not really my game.
Yo, welcome back. All right, so after Speak, where are we going from here? I think you figured it out by now. We got guests in all of these clips. So, yeah, you're getting an extra special treat with this. So, coming up next, we've got the Brewluminati podcast. When we had those dudes on, Jake and John were, great guys to talk to. It's interesting to me because those guys had a really unique way of approaching conspiracy talk. So, they would crack a beer, talk about beer for a little bit, and then they'd dive into a conspiracy, but they talk about it in a very educated and well-researched manner. Dude, I love this show. Guys, if you guys at the Brewluminati podcast are listening to this episode, please bring on season 2. I am dying for another season. You guys can go check out season 1. It's available on all streaming platforms. Just go ahead and Google search it, Brewluminati podcast, and you will find those boys. Check out their show. Every episode's fantastic. And let's get into it right now. Before we dive into an actual conspiracy topic, I want you guys who are listening to get a chance to really know what the Brewluminati podcast is about, because if this is your first time hearing about it, I really highly recommend you go check out an episode as soon as you're done. They do a lot of great work. It's a really well-produced show, so you should definitely go take a listen. It's going to be something you enjoy listening to for sure. But can you guys just explain, like, how did the whole Brewluminati podcast come to be a thing? I don't know which one of you wants to take that one and run with it.
You want me to start?
Sure. Yeah. Go ahead, Jake.
Sure. Yeah. So I think John's wife and my wife kind of became friends, and we had been hanging out at breweries here and there. And right around the time frame that was happening was the whole birds aren't real thing started to really blow up and become popular. And so people were out there kind of just trying to figure out if those guys were serious or not. And I had thought it'd be kind of a cool thing, just do a tongue-in-cheek, straight-faced, like, here it's real and here's how it goes, and outline the whole history of how it was formed. And so we did an episode which just came out a couple weeks ago that was, here's how the FBI did it, here's what the CIA did, and we kind of like used their own documents to show how that panned out. And it was kind of a fun little episode. And then at the end, it's like, yeah, obviously it's not a real thing, but it's fun to talk about that way. But both of us kind of have a passion in the historical side and the mental health aspects of conspiracy theories. So our first real 2 episodes were all about social media and its impacts on mental health. And we broke down how those companies basically get under your skin and try to own you, and looked at it as a bigger picture of, is that a conspiracy or is it a real thing? Did they do it on purpose, or is it an accident that happened while they were just trying to seek out profit, And so we explored all of that in our first 2 episodes. And so it's been a fun journey, kind of learning this stuff, doing the historical breakdowns of all these things. And we're looking into stuff like Ted Kaczynski and MK Ultra, and a lot of the stuff is more actual based conspiracies where, like, there are people conspiring to do harm against each other. And we looked at weaponized ticks and how the government experiments on people, especially in poorer neighborhoods. And it's kind of really heartbreaking stuff when you start digging into the actual paperwork on it.
Yeah, dude.
So,
I mean, the Tuskegee Airmen is one of those that's like it's documented. It's well documented.
Absolutely.
And it is an absolute example of our government using its own people as test subjects.
Yeah.
It's like,
and then
it's crazy.
Yeah, and then when we were doing the Unabomber episode, we looked at kind of what MK Ultra was and how those experiments were conducted, and some of the ones that they did at Harvard and Yale and some of these Ivy League schools, where they would bring these kids in who are 18, 19 years old and sit them down at a desk and basically have them write out everything they did wrong in their lives. And then they would have a professional trial lawyer come in who had read everything these kids wrote, and then just grill them about what they did with their lives and why they were wrong and all this stuff. And you're doing this to an 18-year-old kid who is off at college for the first time. Their brains aren't even fully formed yet. They don't know what's going on, and you're just breaking these kids down, and it's horrifying.
Or like in Ted's case, he was 16.
Yeah,
when they started on him. So yeah.
And I mean, one of the heartbreaking things about the whole Ted Kaczynski thing was these kids started dropping out of this thing left or right. And he came back twice a week, every week for 2 straight years and let this lawyer yell at him, and all these other people were like, no, I'm not going to do this. And he was just there being like, I think I need this for extra credit, and it just kept going, and it's crazy. And you look at how that sort of thing turn somebody into somebody who's mailing bombs to airliners, so
Right.
it's wild to learn the background of this stuff beyond just like, I saw lights in the sky, I saw Bigfoot, which and those are fascinating too, because there's a whole historical breakdown of things. Like when you get into Bigfoot, there's the whole like indigenous people movement and how they utilize the idea of Bigfoot as a way to scare off white settlers and a lot of these other things behind that. And there's some really cool stuff in there that has turned into Bigfoot out in the woods,
which is an interesting concept to just let your mind think about for a second, that a story that indigenous people would have told to try to scare the white man away from settling in their land would still to this day be held on to with such fervor as to people that there's Bigfoot conventions.
Oh yeah.
I was born and raised, and I still live in the Great Northwest.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that's where it started.
I'll be 30 years old this summer, and that's still a big thing to this day.
Yeah, you have Bigfoot tourism in that area. I mean, you can't let that be debunked per se when you rely on that tourism.
Here, like the first time I got a chance to go to Idaho and actually get shown around, we went out to his cabin, and I can't count how many wooden Bigfoot things were just up on the side of the road, just kind of tucked behind some trees, you know what I mean? People literally just trying to be like, oh dude, did you guys see that? But it's literally just a wooden fucking cutout of Bigfoot, legit, just multiple.
Dude, we have multiple people because it's a huge hunting. Hunting here is huge. It's probably one of the biggest incomes for taxes in this state. So you'll see a lot of people that are, maybe moved from out of state, and they live here now, and they're hunting for the first time in their life, and they get up to some clear cut, and they're taking, they're out there with their 10-year-old son hunting for the first time in their life, and they're all suited up, they're in some tree fort, and they're taking a video, and they hear what they think, they don't know what the fuck it is, but it's probably just some cat in distress, or some cat hunting something down, or a dead fucking deer screaming its head off, and you've probably seen those videos of decrepit screams in the woods.
Yep.
And there's some 10-year-old kid scared to death of his life because he doesn't know what the fuck it is. But there's a lot of that shit that goes on up here.
Yeah,
I like to look at.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say I like to.
This is the audio equivalent of one person tries to step out of the other one's way, and they just keep.
I know, dude. It happens all the time. But I was gonna say, in the Beast of Bladenboro episode we just did, we talk about how bobcats make this screaming sound that sounds like babies crying.
Oh, dude, it is.
Yeah,
it is scary. I've been out in the woods partying and shit, and we've heard some pretty weird sounds, and you're like, that's not an animal. That's the devil.
Yeah. And that's what those stories are. It's a bunch of boogeyman stuff, there's a whole culture of that same thing around Mount St. Helens, which we talk about in the Skunk Ape episode.
Huge.
Yeah. But there's this whole story there where there's these monsters that live up in the hills, and they don't mess with the indigenous people. But if you're white and you go up on the mountain, you're going to have your arms ripped off. So it's
well,
yeah.
I mean, that reminds me of I think it's Australia's Coober Pedy region, if I remember correctly. Similar idea where they believe that there's some sort of creature that lives amongst the rocks out there, and that if you go wandering out there, you're going to be taken by these monsters and eaten alive. And so there's lots of these, stories from different cultures all over the place. I mean, you guys,
wolves, dude. Wolves. There's a big story behind the wolves around here, because in the last, I want to say, since I've been a child, I mean people were pulling elk out of the woods in handfuls, and then all of a sudden it seemed like overnight in a decade, our elk population's dwindling, our moose are actually being taken down by these gigantic fucking wolves, and people think that they're comic-like creatures, but they've actually been brought down from Canada. And there's just like this whole conspiracy about these wolves and shit that have spread throughout Idaho and Montana and stuff, and they're fucking huge.
Yeah, dude, we'll infiltrate anywhere. Like, we're good. It's the biggest open border in the world. Like, that's hello.
I mean, let's be honest.
They're gonna come dominate, bro. They're like, yeah, we're
no, dude.
Canada.
These aren't like they're not dogs.
Shots.
They're fucking horses. Like
there's a difference. Yeah,
they're fucking gigantic.
But that's the thing, though. Animals don't know borders. They don't give a fuck.
No.
If there's food, they're going there.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they don't care if they're Canadian wolves. You know how many Canadian geese are shitting right down the street right now in somebody's yard?
Yeah, right.
God damn it.
Yeah, bro.
Like, you're Canadian. Go back home.
So I got a question. Like, so you guys started this with basically like what Jake had said. Like, that was like the idea, and that ended up being a later episode. But you guys have obviously you do a lot of research.
Yeah.
So my question is like, how do you guys decide what something is interesting enough, and how do you go about finding what could possibly be interesting? Are you literally just doing a Google search like conspiracy theories for insert random thing that you're looking at, or is it you just something gets brought to your attention? How do you guys decide?
So we use a lot of data analytics and stuff like that to help us figure out what we want to talk about. So like when we first started the podcast, we did a demo episode to kind of test out our whole format, see if we thought it was going to work, make sure we could make the audio work and all that stuff. But once we did that, we kind of decided on our first handful of episodes on our own. But once we had the show kind of up and running and we were able to get data out of how our listens were going, we were able to use some of our contacts at the hosting service and at like YouTube and at Spotify and stuff like that. And basically they pull reporting for us that says, here's the top 200 things that people are looking at and the frequency in which they're looking at it within your conspiracy genre. And then we take that and we're basically like, all right, let's figure out what of these we can make a good episode about. And then let's use the ones that people are looking for.
Which,
so
I
then
mean,
that
brilliant.
God damn.
Yeah. So that kind of steers us in the direction a little bit. And so far we've been really focused on more of the humanitarian type ones, the ones that are really based in reality and are fairly true and stuff like that, or at least the ones that are blowing up across the internet, like QAnon and Pizzagate and all that kind of stuff, which of course we know they're not true. But what's different about our podcast than other conspiracy podcasts is like, we're not out here just to like talk about crazy space shit, which we will eventually talk about crazy space shit because we're gonna have to, and I want to because I'm obsessed with crazy space shit. But right, but we've really started by looking at these ones like the Ticks episode, right? That is totally founded. It's completely more or less real because that information has been declassified by the FBI.
Which is crazy. So, I mean, for those people who don't understand, what you're basically saying here is that Lyme disease was man-made through ticks.
There is some evidence to point in that direction, yeah. And you know, even back in the 70s, Congress put together a whole investigation of it that ended up getting shut down.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of questions there that nobody really answered, and there's a lot of evidence if you look at the background of like where, not just Lyme disease, but kind of tick-borne illnesses, where they like started, you know. So originally when it started launching, it was called Montauk's knee.
Yeah,
it was this disease that like locals in Montauk would get, and it was basically the arthritis you get from Lyme's disease. But they didn't know because a lot of Lyme disease symptoms aren't really outward and forward. It's
right.
It's a very odd disease. Things come and go.
It's so crazy to think about that because I remember being a child growing up out here in Idaho on a hot summer day, and like, you know, my dad driving down the road in his little red Toyota and like looking over and then there's a tick on his arm, you know, and he like flicks it off, or like, you know, we'd be racing or something out in the you know, on a track, and there's always ticks in the dirt and shit. And you'd come in from the races and they'd be all over your shirt, and he'd be like, you gotta get that shit off, they'll give you Lyme's disease.
Yeah. And that's supposedly where that came from, is some, you know, government lab up there, you know.
I mean, when I did my research on it, I was pretty well convinced, and I mean, I was looking into that maybe 10 years ago. And at 10 years ago, the evidence that was available to us really felt convincing enough to me to believe that the Montauk laboratory had an issue where there was a power loss, and these ticks that they were experimenting on got out into the general public. And that's horrifying to think about, that like to this day people suffer from this, and there's no restitution for those people.
And it's, I mean, and like I said before, it's not even just Lyme disease. You know, you can, if you start looking at the documents that came out around the same time as that, you know, in the 50s and 60s, the U.S. military would back panel trucks up to this overpass and put a fan in the back of it and just blow basically weaponized fleas and mites into this poor neighborhood in St. Louis. And they would just fill the neighborhood to watch how fast it would spread through there. It was called Operation Big Itch or Big Buzz or something along those lines. We covered it in the episode. And they were literally just ground blasting, and they created these bombs that were made out of cardboard that they would fill with fleas and mites and ticks and stuff. And they would just drop these in neighborhoods, and they would blow up, and they would send these bugs all over the neighborhood.
Yeah,
you know,
they'd literally airdrop them.
Yeah. And I think they're called E14 bombs or something like that.
Yeah, it's like a cardboard it's a cardboard air to ground bomb that they just fill with like 500,000 fleas or something, and then they just airdrop them into poor neighborhoods, and then they have people out there in like panel vans tracking where they go.
Is this like, I mean, it's because they're kind of planning like some sort of weapon?
Yeah, so they basically they were testing the efficacy of using this as a militarized bioweapon to see if they could use it overseas in some way that would be effective. I mean, but they tested on us because they can, like they do the same thing with airborne bioweapons. They'll just like fly planes over some area and they'll spray all this shit out into the air, and then they'll monitor it to see whether or not they can, you know, predict where the wind is going to blow this shit and see whether or not it would work overseas, you know, based on the data they collect. And like there's tons of information about that that's been declassified where they've exactly.
And you can't track it because when you're using something like weaponized animals and pests, you can't immediately, there's plausible deniability across the board there. You can't immediately prove that any one person is responsible for a weaponized creature.
Sure.
Right. Yeah, and I mean, around 10 years after that in Vietnam, they were, you know, air spraying soldiers with LSD to see how they would react to it. And, you know, when you have 50 soldiers sitting around with their guns in the middle of a field and they just get air sprayed with LSD, you know, there's going to be problems from that sort of thing.
Mm-hmm.
You know, the movie Jacob's Ladder is based on that.
Dude, that's crazy.
Yeah.
Our U.S. government is fucked, bro.
Bro. Old governments, man, because like, let's be honest, like, we're not the only culprits here. Like Germany was known for doing this. Like, but like but what's crazy is that like when we think about history, right? We go to school and we learn our world history. We learn about the fucked up things that like Germany did to German people without the German people's consent. But we just assume that could never happen here.
We're the good guys.
Have you guys watched any of Project Blue Book?
I know a lot, but I haven't watched the.
I've watched a few episodes of it. Yeah,
it's actually pretty good. I mean, obviously it's Hollywoodized, but for the most part, they really kind of break down some shit, and then they really go into depth on how our U.S. government covered up a lot of the shit.
Yeah, no, they definitely do that, and so probably the main thing that's different about our show from most other conspiracy shows, like if you hear we're a conspiracy show and you immediately think something like Tinfoil Hat with Sam Tripoli or what's that dude's name? Alex Jones. Our show is not like that. We're not going to spin you some unfounded bullshit.
Right.
We're going to go into the history of it. We're going to talk all about who the people are, where it came from, why it rose, how it's affecting us now. And then we're going to talk about whether we think it's real or not, or if this is founded in any kind of way.
Then it just doesn't create any more rumors. It doesn't create any more false information at that point. Like you're really trying to dig to the absolute truth of it.
Yeah, exactly.
Which I respect 100%, because like sometimes I'll just jump down the rabbit hole because it's fun. You know, it's fun to read about shit that's not publicized and stuff. And sometimes it can consume you in a way that is not mentally healthy.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
exactly. And we talk about that a lot. We talk about the mental health side effects of it, which people seem to really like, because a lot of that information's not out there, right? You don't think about when you jump on your phone and you jump on Instagram or you're on Facebook or whatever, that essentially immediately makes you a statistical likelihood for certain kinds of eating disorders, for certain kind of mental and mood disorders, for certain types of suicidal and self-harm behavior, and we cover a lot of that kind of stuff. So
yeah, and then of course when you start getting into the depths of being into the conspiracy theory world, I mean, you could probably do a whole series on its own about the damages of becoming an info warrior and following the whole Alex Jones path. But I mean, we had talked briefly before the show about your QAnon work that you've been doing, and the mental health aspects of that are something that I'm very intrigued by.
Yeah, and we definitely talk through like how those mental health, effects really come in, because there's a point where, this stuff starts showing up on 4chan, it starts showing up on 8chan, it makes its way to Reddit, it comes over to Facebook and stuff like that. And random house moms and church moms and soccer moms and
grandmas and grandpas.
Not just moms, but all people, men and women and children, all get roped into this shit and they believe it. And that's exactly why I'm forgetting the guy's name right now, but the guy who from North Carolina who thought Pizzagate was real showed up at Comet Ping Pong with an AR-15. We see real life impacts of this kind of stuff. And like they've shown statistical likelihoods of social media being able to be used to do like internet espionage essentially and topple governments and shit. Like it's happening in I can't remember where it is.
That's like Australia, how they're like banning all that stuff and they're like making. I saw something on the news yesterday, and I think that Facebook has got like a ban in Australia because they have like an election going on. And
so there's a lot of stuff in there about news. Yeah, how they distribute the news.
The whole issue there is that Australia wants Facebook to pay a tax basically on every news post that's shared on their platform. And Facebook, in an effort to kind of make a stand against the Australian government, said, well, then we're going to completely remove the ability to share news by all Australian users because we're not willing to pay this outrageous price just for our users to share information. Which I am not a Facebook supporter, to be fair. I mean, I want to put that out there.
It's hard to be.
I hate Mark Zuckerberg. I mean, if you look at my Facebook feed these days, I basically only plug the Shedtime podcast now with my Facebook. But that being said, this is something I have to agree with them on. It is a dangerous precedent for a government to ask a social media platform to pay a tax just on information being shared.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, on the one hand, it's a dangerous precedent. At the same time, we're starting to have laws passed in the United States now about what kind of information these social media giants can have and use against the users, right? So there's a handful of states now who have passed basically personal data security laws that now prevent these social media companies from tracking or using any of the data that their users generate against them, which is essentially what these social media platforms do, right? They have these giant AI machines that track tens of thousands of data points on every single person who uses them, and then they use that data against you to essentially addict you to their platform, because there's a measurable amount of dopamine hit you get every time you get a notification from a platform, or every time a celebrity interacts with you, or every time somebody sends you a message or whatever. And that really, is where the mental health aspect comes in. And that's how we can have data like between 2009 and now, there's been almost a 200% increase in suicide attempts of, 14 to 18-year-old high school age girls. You know what I mean? And that shit is real and it's happening, and that hurts people, so.
It's crazy to think about, right? Because like running a podcast, we're in a position where we need that data to better understand our listeners and produce something that our listeners want. And on one hand, I feel like we are approaching that with a moral obligation, a sense of moral obligation. and we're trying to only do things to benefit our consumer. But it is scary to think that that same data can be used in such a manipulative fashion.
Yeah, it's true. I mean,
go ahead.
My background, I started as an investigative reporter right out of college. And so I worked as a journalist for years. I was a cop reporter, beat reporter, and kind of worked my way up. And so I do that ethical feeling is 100% there. Like, I feel like there is a moral to like bring all of this together, you know? So you listen to a lot of people who are currently talking about QAnon, and they're just talking about, oh, it's goofy, these people are in a cult, and they leave it at that, you know, and they don't really dive deep into how this happened, how people got there. And so we actually broke down the history of QAnon and where it came from, going all the way back to like 1100 AD, when the first kind of movement happened where people defamed other people and blamed another kind of source for it. And so what had happened, and that was in England in 1100 AD, there was a young boy found dead in the woods outside of town, outside of Norwich, England. And what they did was essentially a local holy guy who was kind of looking to promote himself, and he had a church. He basically straight up just said it was the Jews. Like, he blamed the Jewish people in that region, and he made up this whole story about how the Jewish people in that region every year all get together and they choose to kill one person so they can drain their blood and put it in their bread. And like, he just made this whole story up. And it resulted in, within 100 years, all of the Jews were expelled from England. And I mean, there were arrests, there was hundreds of executions, and it all happened because this one dude just made something up, you know? And so you can follow the path of that kind of single incidents through things like the Salem witch trials and, the satanic panic of the 70s and 80s, where people were scared to take their kids to daycare centers because there were all these people who were writing books that were all debunked later, and saying that, like, oh, this kid was definitely raped because of Satan. And there was no rape. The kid wasn't sexually abused. None of that stuff was happening. They just kind of fed the kids these stories because it fit a narrative of somebody they wanted to blame. And that just carried on. And so you follow the path of that, and it brings us to things like, you know, Pizzagate, Pedogate, QAnon. And now they're even roping in, like, you know, yoga moms in the suburbs because they're using the hashtag Save the Children. And I mean, honestly, what monster wouldn't get behind the idea of saving children? Like, you have to be a horrible person if you don't support that, you know?
Yeah. I mean, this is exactly how Eric Rudolph was able to survive in Nantahala Wilderness for 8 years or 6 years or however long it was, because he bombed the Atlanta Olympics and then turned around and bombed a gay bar and an abortion clinic and stuff like that. And then he went to hide in Nantahala Wilderness, and he convinced all of the locals that he was this like children saving God warrior, and they protected him. And then, you know, and really all he did that for was as a smokescreen, because his real goal was to kill cops.
Which is so incidental of the psychology of the serial killer mind. Because I mean, I'm hearing that, I'm immediately thinking of, you know, Ted Bundy. Ted Bundy literally was in a search party for one of his own victims.
Or the Night Stalker.
And Richard Ramirez, another great example who came to mind. Absolutely.
Well, like, think about, like, not only him, but the Cecil Hotel and just how much shit's gone down in the Cecil Hotel, and then, like, how they tried to rope, you know, conspiracy theories into, like, the Lisa Lam, you know, case and all that shit, and, like, how she just showed up and disappeared, and then all these old people around, you know, what is it, Skid Row and shit around there were coming down with TB after that. And it's some crazy shit, man. And people can get lost, and they can get lost really quick.
Yeah, what's crazy and hard about the whole conspiracy scene is, like, there's this almost backwardsness to when something is true, it gets played off as a conspiracy, but when it's not, people grab onto it and they run with it. It's like this data point that we cover in one of our first 2 episodes where the shareability of fake news is like 700% higher than the shareability of real news. And so if it's not true, people grab onto it, and people are like, no, this is a conspiracy, like, you need to chill, and they just run with it. But shit that's really happening, and there's data for, and there's papers on, and there's declassified documents on, people are like, nah, that shit's fake.
I mean,
Right.
psychologically, everybody wants to feel like they have this little element of one-upsmanship, right? Like
Yep.
we all want to be in the know and have some sort of secret inside knowledge that everybody else doesn't have, and
Or it's
so
like,
it plays to that like desire.
well, that, and it's like with the QAnon thing, they make everybody feel like they're being a part of something, or they're serving for a better
Right.
good. You know what I mean? It's
I mean, the QAnon thing is crazy too, because like you've got that Wayfair issue, where that kind of like sprang out of that, where all of a sudden people are being like, oh, here's a missing kid with the same name as this dresser for $2,300 or whatever, and it's almost like at times we forget that we're just suspending our sense of belief in reality.
Yeah.
You know?
well, that, and it's something like, it's almost too good to be true, so you have to believe it. You know what I mean? Like, oh, there's this many people like that think it's real, and they're normal people, and it's like this 50-year-old lady from Atlanta, you know what I mean, that's like sharing this shit. Like,
Yeah, but don't you think
it all
like
becomes
partly,
too relevant at that
but don't
point.
you guys think that partly this has to play is that you can have someone that seems like, I'm quoting this, like normal, right? And they'll have some sort of like underlying thing that allows them to be open to the ideas that other people might think are too far out there. But it would never portray in like their average life, but they just might go home and once a week they'll spend 6 hours listening to a podcast on conspiracies, then researching and doing their own information and research on whatever was talked about, and then they'll go back to their normal life after that. And I think that that's what it comes down to for some of these. Like some of them are too far out there for people to believe, and they'll never get to that point. But there's some people that just have that slight door crack that allows like them to just look in just enough, and without walking by it and it being closed, they don't even think about opening it, right? And that'd be like a lot of people. They don't think about conspiracy theories because those doors are never cracked open. But
Absolutely.
there's just there might be some things like there could be someone that believes in like QAnon, but then something that is actually, to me, far more believable would be like, no, that's super fake. Like I'm not even gonna put time into that. So it's just like all these things that are going on in people's brains that it must make them more susceptible to certain things. Just like how
Absolutely.
I like different things. And let's say that I want to vape an e-liquid or drink a beer or whatever, and I'm gonna like something different than a lot of other people. It's like my brain is more open to those flavors, or my brain is more open to those conspiracies.
Absolutely.
And I think that that's like part of the thing that fucking blows my mind when it comes to like Facebook and shit, is that I'll see people that I've known for 25 years and they'll post something and you'll see the comments and like they're like just so into it and defending it, and like when people question them, they'll come back with like some response, like they've put plenty of thought into their response, and you can tell that they're really involved in this. What to me it seems fucking ridiculous.
Dude, I find that all the time when I scroll through my
Facebook,
dude.
just like you're saying, like it goes from 4chan to Reddit to Facebook, and it just makes it so like that Karen, is like on her way to her like soccer kids practice, you know what I mean? We'll be listening to this like crazy conspiracy, like, and you're just like, what? Like, how is this even possible? How'd you even know about this? But it's like, oh, well, I saw it on my Facebook newsfeed, and now they're like deep diving into this.
And welcome back. Check it out. We could not bring this episode to a close without this illustrious guest. We here at the Shedtime podcast are beyond honored to represent Dynavap. It is truly our favorite dry herb extraction device. You hear it in every episode. We love those guys. It is literally our favorite product ever when you want a dry herb vape. It was a complete honor to be able to have George, the founder and inventor of the entire company and brand and product to come on and discuss the origins, the designing process, the thought that went into creating Dynavap. To this date right now, it is probably one of my most favorite episodes that we have done. And I think the boys would agree. It is probably one of the most special guests we've ever had. A big shout out to our friends over at Dynavap, Donna, George, and the rest of the team. You guys are so good to us, and we truly appreciate the support you give us, and I'm glad to know that you guys appreciate all the support we have for you. So let's get into this clip with George from Dynavap, where we do a nice deep dive with George all about what inspired the whole Dynavap. Let's do it.
So George, I have a question then. Obviously, you know, you're into consuming cannabis, and so chances are that because you've created something like this and you get to experience flavors like I do, I need to know what are like some of the things that you try to utilize cannabis for, like for flavor. Do you like have pain, or like what was like the whole reasoning of why you were like, I need to come up with this vaporizer?
You know, that's a really good question, Chris. And I don't know if anyone's ever phrased it to me quite like that. You know, normally it's like, well, how did you come up with it? It's like, well, I was looking for something that was more simple and more economical. Because, you know, at that point in time, and I think even now, there just weren't that many good options on the market for, you know, for a method to consume not just your cannabis, but your botanicals without lighting them on fire.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, in terms of personally, why? Well, the reality is, I found that a little bit of the right, we'll just say, essential oils can really take many different situations and shift perception, shift the way that you're thinking, shift the way that you're feeling. You know, I found that certain types of cannabis really help if I'm looking for a little bit of a shift in my creativity. And I like to create, and it's, you know, it's one of the more satisfying things that I do with my time is, I need to fix something. You know, I need to make something better. And after a bit, you know, especially in the evenings, it's like, okay, I need to shift my perspective a little bit because it's time. And that was probably one of the bigger motivations back then. You know, of course, there's times, especially now as I'm gaining a few years of experience, that there's some other benefits that come along for the ride. You know, if I've maybe overdone it a little bit physically, it kind of helps take the edge off.
Yeah, absolutely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. That's see, now that I like, because we all have drive to do something, you know, whatever it is that motivates us in life. And I like that you're a problem solver, which leads me to this question. What were some of the problems in dry herb vaping that you wanted to solve?
I feel like you solved a few, quite a few of them, to be honest.
Yeah, well, that was certainly the goal. And, well, let's start with the top, right? The real mission, and I'd have to say it still is the mission behind the why, right? Was why is it that people are still lighting things on fire and inhaling the smoke on purpose? And when I asked myself that question, even though, you know, the idea and the concept and the availability of, you know, a vaporizer has been around for, you know, not just a few years, it's been around for quite a while.
Oh, mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The first answer I came to is they're just too damn expensive. You know, all the savings and everything else aside, you know, when you're talking about a person that doesn't have a lot of income and they hear about this new technology, it's like, oh, you know, this thing could really reduce the amount of money that you're spending on cannabis, for example. So then you got to spend $300. You got to spend $400. You got to spend $500 just to try it.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
That's a heck of a risk for someone that might only be making $500 a week.
Yeah, you
right?
spend almost your whole paycheck just to try it.
Right, and then that's before taxes. You take out the taxes, you might have to be saving for 6-7 months. If you've got expenses, trying to put away, $20 here, $50 there, just to try this. And then what if it doesn't work, and you don't have any friends that have one? So I'd have to say that one of the biggest determining factors is cost. Why do vaporizers need to be so expensive? And then second to that was, why do they have to be so complicated, and why do they have to be so big? So those are I'd say the three primary driving factors is why do they have to be so expensive, so complicated, and so big?
God, 100%.
Fourth came durability. And after I'm asking myself these questions, is like, okay, how difficult could it possibly be to make a simple, durable device that allows a person to selectively thermal extract the compounds they're seeking? So I got right to it. It was a really fun moment that I contemplate regularly, especially during conversations like this. Is like, from the time I was asking myself that question, I was having a conversation with some people that I know and kind of enjoyed spending time with, and I got right up. I went over to my little workbench and started grabbing some things and put together the first mock-up. It took me about 10 minutes, just to prove the concept. It was a really simple thing. It was just a glass vial, and it took apart a Bic pen like we've all done before, because you need to know the parts.
Yeah.
And I used the body of the Bic pen as a straw, and I just took a lighter and I just started heating the outside of the glass vial till things look like they're getting hot enough, and I used the straw to kind of draw the vapor out of the inside, and it's like, yep, that works. Okay. So it isn't that difficult. Now, how do we make this simple enough that anyone can use, and people that actually are going to want to use it so that it works reliable? That's where it got a bit more complicated.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because
So
the
I can
form
see
factor of a glass vial and a nug of bud in there is not as friendly as a Dynavap.
But not only that, but like he's saying, have it like be something that everybody's going to be able to use. So like the consistency factor, you know what I mean? Like, how are you going to know when it's ready to go? You know what I mean? And like, I feel like that, like, I'm really curious about the cap, man, because the cap is what interests me the most about the Dynavap, to be completely honest with you.
Well,
it's just how that
seems to me where
that's the thing, bro.
The
I feel like
bulk of your
that's
technology
that's where the
lies, right?
science is the
Yes.
cap. And like, I'm so interested in to see on like how that thought process went down, because I think it's just ingenious.
Well, so that was really fun. So after messing around with the vial, I tried a couple of different things, messing around with the glass and playing with the torch and bending and distorting. And I ended up with some using, if you're familiar with just like an eyedropper, right? You see my medicine bottles. Sometimes they're referred to as pipettes, right? And found a couple of those, cut the end off, not the tapered part, but the end where the little rubber boot sits. And found that I could use a torch to just heat it up a little bit. And because of the surface tension of glass, when you're getting hot, it just kind of automatically neck in, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it made like a little tiny one-hitter. And so the first iterations of how can we make a very simple and usable, thermal extraction device was basically a little glass one-hitter. And I was just heating the side, like we hit a Vap cap now, with just a regular Bic lighter. And it worked just fine. But as I was trying to show it to a couple people, I was like, what do you mean heat the side? Okay, so they're heating it. And if you weren't very careful, and the flame would just kind of come right around the end and touch the other part, then when you go to hit it, now you're smoking it because you've ignited it. Or okay, now you're telling me to take this one hitter and instead of just lighting it, I'm supposed to hold it down here, not in my mouth, and heat the side? It just didn't make sense for a lot of people. So the next conclusion was, okay, well, what if we put a cover over the chamber so it'll protect the combustible material that's inside. So even if your hands are a little bit shaky and the flame elixir on the front, it's not going to light anything on fire. And that made a huge difference. It also then functioned as creating a little bit of a heat exchanger. Like, oh, this could be really good because now the air that's traveling between this cap and the outside of the extraction chamber, well, it's coming in contact with all this hot material and it's getting preheated, so it gives you a little bit of a convection feature, right? So as that hot air or that room temperature air or cold outside air is sneaking in between the cap and the tip there, that hot metal, that hot glass at that point heats up that air, and then as it has to do that 180 turn and go through all of your material, well, it's hot and you get that convection action going on. So that worked for the next evolution, and I found myself just constantly thinking, okay, how do I do this? How do I make it better? How do I make it better? How do I make it so that anybody can use it? I need an indicator. And so I did what I think most people do when they're trying to design things, and that is I started looking, okay, how do I make this visual? How do I make a visual indicator? And looked into thermochromic paints and some other things along those lines. You know, lightly looked into using electronics and sensors and stuff like that, but eventually was like, no, too complex, too easy to break, too likely to fail, too much complexity, right? And then I got thinking about, you know, some of the other things that I was dealing with in my life at that time, because I was doing service work, right? And sometimes I had to service fireplaces and stoves and things like that. And these appliances had limit switches, right? If you know what I'm talking about when I say limit switch.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
Okay. It's just a switch that when it gets above a certain temperature, it clicks and it actuates the switch to either open or close a circuit to make sure that your appliance doesn't overheat. Limit switches are in just about all of our appliances, from the compressors in our refrigerators to all of our furnaces, anything that deals with any amount of heat, and a whole lot of even electric motors. They all have limit switches in them. And as I thought about limit switch, oh, I just need to take the guts of a limit switch, figure out some way how to miniaturize it and put it in this cap. And that was that kind of epiphany moment. It's like, oh, that's how we're going to do it. And from that moment, it was just clear. Although it took a long time, from when I came to that conclusion, it took me probably 14 months in order to find a supplier that could actually make me the little snap disc that's the size that fits in that cap. To make one small enough was very difficult. And of the few companies that could do it, I was only able to find one company initially that was able to make one with the temperature range I was looking for, because most of your limit switches actuated a much lower temperature than what we needed in order to get to extraction temperature.
Interesting. All right, let's clear some of that because we are at the end of the episode, guys. I really want to thank you all for hanging in with this one. I thought this was just a great solution to fill this little gap that was going to happen. If you're a patron, you know, I really do hope that you've enjoyed the video that we've produced here, so that way you could have something dope to look at. It is my absolute honor and privilege to create this podcast for you guys. I love my boys. I wish they were here, but this was the next best thing, getting to relive these great moments with the homies, with the whole fam. You saw Ashton in a bunch of these clips. You know how good that felt, right? So, you know what, dude? I'm going to bring it to a close like I always do. Go to shedtimepodcast.com for all the content, links to sponsors, everything. And otherwise, I'm going to tell you like I always do. Don't let the bastards get you down. Be cool. Don't be a dick. And whatever it is that you do, be sure to have some fun. Because it's the Shedtime podcast, and we about to roll on up and roll on out. Yo, it's kind of weird cutting this shit, and I'm like all alone. I keep looking at myself over here and trying to remember to look at the camera for you guys. It's cool.